Elena Rodriguez adjusts her reading glasses and smiles at the 7-year-olds gathered around her feet for story time. The afternoon sun streams through the classroom windows of Pine Ridge Elementary, casting gentle shadows across the colorful alphabet posters adorning every wall. Children's artwork dangles from string lines like miniature flags of innocence, each crayon masterpiece a testament to the creativity she nurtures daily. But today, something extraordinary will shatter this peaceful scene forever. Today, a retired Army colonel will visit this quiet Colorado school and notice something that will change everything anyone has ever believed about this beloved educator. You see, Elena has been hiding a secret so dark, so classified, that even she believed it would stay buried forever beneath layers of finger paint and multiplication tables. But the human body keeps its own records, marking time in ways that transcend official documents, and some marks never truly fade, no matter how desperately we wish they would. What Colonel James Harrison will discover on Elena's arm will reveal a truth so shocking about this gentle third-grade teacher that it will force everyone to question everything they thought they knew about the woman who shapes young minds every single day with patient dedication. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Pine Ridge Elementary School in the heart of Colorado's mountain country. Elena Rodriguez, 34 years old with kind brown eyes and graying temples, had been teaching third grade for 6 peaceful years. Her students absolutely adored her patient demeanor and wonderfully creative lessons that made learning feel like adventure. Parents consistently praised her unwavering dedication during parent-teacher conferences, often commenting on how their children came home excited about school for the first time. Fellow teachers deeply respected her innovative approaches to childhood education and her willingness to stay late, helping struggling students. She drove a modest silver Honda Civic with over 200,000 miles, lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment downtown above the local bakery, and spent her quiet evenings grading papers while classical music played softly in the background. Her colleagues knew she had served in the military before becoming an educator, but Elena kept those details frustratingly vague whenever anyone asked. "I just did my time overseas," she would say, with that gentle, disarming smile that naturally discouraged further questions about her past. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, had hired Eleanor 6 years ago based on her impeccable references and her obvious burning passion for teaching. What Mrs. Henderson didn't know was that Elena's military records had been completely scrubbed from all government databases by people with clearance levels that officially didn't exist. Colonel James Harrison, now 62 and recently retired after 4 decades of distinguished military service, had volunteered to speak to the students about Veterans Day and the importance of remembering those who served. He had completed 3 grueling tours in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2016, witnessing combat operations that still haunted his dreams, and he understood the critical importance of connecting with the next generation about service and sacrifice. As he walked through the cheerfully decorated hallway toward Elena's classroom, past bulletin boards covered with student poems about gratitude and colorful turkeys made from traced handprints, he carefully reviewed his notes about discussing courage and service in terms that young children could understand without frightening them. Mrs. Henderson had briefed him thoroughly about the teacher, a former service member herself, someone who would genuinely appreciate his message and help reinforce the lessons with her students. The classroom door was decorated with a large banner reading, "Welcome Colonel Harrison," in crayon letters of every color imaginable. When he entered the bright, welcoming classroom, filled with the scent of markers and hand sanitizer, Elena stood gracefully to greet him with a warm, firm handshake that felt oddly familiar. The children were seated in neat rows on the colorful carpet, their eager young faces turned expectantly toward their distinguished visitor. As Eleanor gestured for him to take his place at the front of the room near the whiteboard, covered with the day's math problems, her navy blue cardigan sweater sleeve rode up slightly on her left forearm. Colonel Harrison's extensively trained eye immediately caught something that made his blood run ice cold in his veins. There, barely visible beneath the soft fabric of her teacher clothes, were small, deliberate scarification marks running in a precise line up her forearm. These weren't random scars from childhood accidents or medical procedures that everyone accumulates over a lifetime. These were intentional marks, each one deliberately placed with surgical precision and healing in identical patterns. Harrison had seen similar markings only once before in his entire military career, and that was on the arms of the most elite snipers he had ever encountered in the deadliest operations of the Afghan conflict. In the shadowy world of special operations, particularly among Black Ops sniper units operating without official oversight, confirmed kills were sometimes marked in ways that would never appear in official records or after-action reports. The practice was forbidden by military regulations, but Harrison knew it happened in the darkest corners of warfare, where psychological coping mechanisms took precedence over written rules. As Elena moved around the classroom, preparing materials for his presentation while chatting easily with the children about being respectful listeners, Harrison found himself studying her with the intensity of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. Her posture was absolutely perfect, maintaining the rigid discipline that only came from years of military training, though she disguised it beneath the casual demeanor of an elementary school teacher. Her eyes constantly and subtly scanned the room, automatically noting exit points and potential threats in a way that seemed completely natural, but was actually the result of extensive tactical training. Colonel Harrison began his carefully prepared presentation about military service, patriotism, and the importance of remembering those who sacrifice for freedom. But his mind was racing with possibilities that seemed impossible, yet increasingly undeniable. Those marks on Elena's arm weren't random scarification or some kind of artistic expression. Each small scar represented something specific and deadly, something that only the most specialized and lethal soldiers would carry as permanent reminders of their actions in combat zones. As he spoke to the fascinated children about courage, duty, and protecting others, Harrison found himself studying Elena with growing suspicion and professional curiosity. When he mentioned Afghanistan and the challenges soldiers faced overseas, he noticed Elena's hands briefly tighten into fists before consciously relaxing again. Her breathing remained controlled, but there was a subtle tension in her shoulders that suggested his words were triggering memories she worked hard to suppress. During his description of dangerous missions and the bravery required in combat situations, Elena's eyes took on a distant quality, as if she were remembering things she'd rather forget but couldn't completely escape. When a sudden loud noise erupted from the hallway, a janitor dropping a metal bucket, Elena's reaction was instantaneous and completely revealing to someone trained to recognize such responses. Her body tensed like a coiled spring. Her hand moved instinctively toward her right hip, where a sidearm would normally rest, and her eyes immediately assessed the threat level with cold, professional calculation before forcing herself to relax back into her careful teacher persona. Harrison had witnessed that exact response countless times in combat zones from soldiers who had seen serious action and developed the hypervigilance that kept them alive in hostile environments. After the presentation concluded and the children filed out for their scheduled recess time, chattering excitedly about the colonel's stories and asking Elena if they could write thank you letters, Harrison deliberately lingered in the classroom. Elena began cleaning the whiteboard with practiced efficiency, erasing math problems and writing tomorrow's spelling words in her neat handwriting, seemingly unaware of his intense scrutiny, but actually hyper-aware of his continued presence. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said carefully, keeping his voice conversational but probing, "I noticed during my remarks that you served overseas. Which unit were you with?" Elena's hand paused on the whiteboard eraser for just a fraction of a second too long, barely perceptible to most people, but glaring to someone trained in interrogation techniques. "Just support staff, Colonel," she replied with studied casualness, not turning around to face him. Nothing exciting or dangerous. Mostly administrative work behind the wire. But Harrison had spent 4 decades reading people under pressure, analyzing micro-expressions and vocal patterns that revealed deception, and absolutely everything about Elena's demeanor screamed carefully constructed lies. The way she deliberately avoided eye contact by continuing to face the whiteboard, the slight but noticeable tension in her shoulders, the calculated casualness of her response that sounded rehearsed rather than natural. He decided to test his growing theory with more direct pressure. "I had the privilege of serving with some truly remarkable snipers during my time in Afghanistan," he said, watching her reflection in the whiteboard for any telltale reactions. One in particular had a kill count so extraordinarily high that the Pentagon ultimately classified their entire service record above top secret. Elena turned around slowly, and for just one unguarded moment, Harrison saw something genuinely dangerous flash in her eyes before the mild-mannered teacher mask slipped carefully back into place like a well-practiced disguise. "That must have been quite impressive, Colonel," she said quietly, but her voice carried undertones that made Harrison's survival instincts whisper warnings. "I imagine it takes exceptional skill and nerves to excel in that role." But Harrison knew with absolute certainty that he had struck gold. The woman standing before him in her comfortable teaching clothes, surrounded by children's artwork and educational posters, wasn't just hiding routine military service. She was concealing something so monumentally significant that powerful people had gone to extraordinary lengths to completely erase every trace of her previous existence from official records. The Elena Rodriguez that existed on paper was a carefully constructed fiction, and beneath that fiction was someone far more dangerous than anyone could possibly imagine. That evening, Harrison made a series of encrypted phone calls to old contacts still active in military intelligence networks, calling in favors accumulated over decades of service and trading information with people whose names would never appear in any official directory. The initial responses were frustrating and seemingly confirmed Elena's cover story. There was absolutely no record of her serving in any combat capacity whatsoever. What Harrison eventually discovered through his most classified contacts chilled him to the bone and validated his worst suspicions. Elena Rodriguez, according to every official database and government record, had never served in any branch of the military. Her social security number was completely clean, her background check spotless, her teaching credentials entirely legitimate and earned through traditional academic channels. But Harrison had connections in the darkest corners of special operations, relationships forged in classified missions that officially never happened, and after calling in several substantial favors with people who could disappear permanently for talking, he finally reached someone willing to speak off the record through multiple layers of encryption and voice distortion. There was a sniper," his contact whispered over a quantum-encrypted line that bounced signals through 7 countries. "Operational codename Ghost. 57 confirmed kills in 18 months of deployment. Most of them were high-value targets in operations so black they don't exist in any database. The most successful sniper in the history of Joint Special Operations Command, and also the most classified. When the unit was disbanded after a political scandal that never made the news, everyone involved had their records completely destroyed and new identities created. Harrison's blood turned to ice water as the pieces of an impossible puzzle fell into their terrifying places. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a former sniper hiding her military service from her civilian colleagues. She was Ghost, one of the most lethal and effective operatives the United States military had ever produced, and she had been teaching elementary school children for 6 years with her true identity completely hidden. The next morning, Harrison returned to Pine Ridge Elementary with singular determination and a plan that could either reveal the truth or get him killed by someone whose skills exceeded his own by several orders of magnitude. He found Elena in her classroom during her planning period, carefully organizing art supplies for her afternoon lesson, while soft music played from a small speaker, the picture of domestic tranquility and educational dedication. Sunlight streamed through windows decorated with student-made paper snowflakes, illuminating someone who appeared to be nothing more threatening than a dedicated teacher preparing for another day of nurturing young minds. "Dear, we need to talk," he said quietly, closing the classroom door behind him and noting how Elena's posture shifted almost imperceptibly at the sound of the lock engaging. Elena looked up from her supply organization, and this time she didn't bother hiding the steel that lived behind her carefully constructed public persona. The transformation was subtle but complete. Her spine straightened with military precision, her hands stilled with the controlled readiness of someone prepared for violence, and her eyes took on the cold calculation of a predator assessing a potential threat. "I don't know what you think you know, Colonel," she said, in a voice that remained conversational, but carried undertones that made Harrison's combat-trained instinct scream danger warnings. "But I'm just a teacher who loves her students and wants to continue her quiet life." Harrison stepped closer, close enough to see the barely visible scars on her forearm, and lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "Ghost." The single word hit Elena like a physical blow that she absorbed without flinching, though her carefully constructed facade crumbled in an instant, to be replaced by the deadly stillness of an apex predator calculating response options to an existential threat. "That name means absolutely nothing to me, Colonel," Elena replied, but her voice now carried a warning that made Harrison's survival instincts scream at maximum volume, while his rational mind catalogued the distances to potential weapons and exit routes. 57 confirmed kills, Harrison continued with the steady calm of someone who had faced death before and understood he was facing it again. The most successful sniper in the history of Joint Special Operations Command. Targets eliminated at distances that shouldn't have been possible with standard equipment. A ghost who appeared, eliminated high-value targets, and vanished without a trace. And now you're teaching finger painting to 8-year-olds and reading bedtime stories during quiet time. Elena's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the scissors on her desk. Not an obvious aggressive motion, but a subtle positioning that someone with Harrison's training recognized as preparation for violence. Even now, surrounded by children's artwork and educational posters, she was automatically calculating angles and distances, planning her response to what she perceived as a mortal threat to the carefully constructed new life she had built from nothing. The woman who read stories and taught multiplication tables was still fundamentally a weapon of extraordinary precision and lethality, and that weapon was now fully activated and assessing him as a target. You have exactly one choice here, Colonel," Elena said in a voice that remained conversational, but carried the absolute certainty of someone who had killed before and would kill again, without hesitation. "You can walk out of this classroom, forget this conversation ever happened, and continue your retirement in blissful ignorance. Or you can continue down this path and discover that some secrets are worth killing to protect. You have a choice too," Harrison said, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of peace while maintaining eye contact that communicated he wasn't backing down despite the very real danger he was facing. You can trust me and finally tell someone the truth about who you really are, or you can do something we'll both regret in a room full of children's desks and artwork." For a long moment that stretched into eternity, they stared at each other across the small classroom that suddenly felt like a battlefield where lives would be decided in the next few seconds. Elena's extensive training told her to eliminate the threat immediately, to protect the identity she had built so carefully with 6 years of patient construction and daily performances. But something in Harrison's eyes, not fear, but understanding and perhaps even respect, made her pause in her calculations. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice carrying exhaustion that came from years of hiding her true nature beneath layers of carefully constructed normalcy. The truth, Harrison replied without hesitation, and maybe an explanation of how the deadliest sniper in United States military history ended up reading bedtime stories to third graders in a Colorado mountain town. Elena slowly sank into her desk chair, and for the first time in 6 years, the crushing weight of her deception and the constant vigilance required to maintain her cover story pressed down on her like physical force. "They told me I was dead," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Officially, completely, permanently dead. Ghost never existed, and Elena Rodriguez was born from absolutely nothing. Complete identity, complete background, complete life history. All I had to do was disappear forever and never let anyone discover who I used to be." Harrison nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her words and the enormous sacrifice it represented. But some things can never be completely erased, can they?" he said gently, gesturing toward her scarred forearm. "The body keeps its own records, regardless of what the official files say." Eleanor slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing the full extent of her scarification for the first time in 6 years. 57 small marks, each one representing a life taken in service to her country. Each one a memory that haunted her dreams and shaped every moment of her existence. "I thought I could leave it all behind," she said, her voice heavy with years of suppressed emotion. "I thought I could become someone else entirely, someone gentle and nurturing instead of someone who dealt in death and destruction. I thought Elena Rodriguez could be real, not just another cover identity." She looked around her classroom, at the motivational posters encouraging kindness and learning, at the student artwork that represented hope and innocence, at the life she had built from nothing through sheer force of will and daily performance. Some days I almost believed it myself. Some days I would wake up, and for just a moment I was really just a teacher who loved her students and worried about lesson plans and parent conferences. But then something would happen. A loud noise, a shadow moving wrong, a feeling of being watched. And I would remember exactly who I am underneath all of this carefully constructed normalcy. "The question that matters now," Harrison said quietly, "is whether you're still that person when everything is stripped away. When push comes to shove and lives are on the line, is Elena Rodriguez real, or is she just another deep cover identity for Ghost?" Elena looked directly at him with the full force of her true nature, no longer hiding behind the mask she had worn for 6 years. "I don't know," she admitted with brutal honesty. "I've been Elena for so long that sometimes I forget who I used to be, what it felt like to live entirely in that world of shadows and targeted elimination. But when that noise happened yesterday during your presentation, when my hand automatically went to my hip, looking for a weapon that wasn't there, when every muscle in my body tensed for combat that never came, I remembered. For just a few seconds, I remembered exactly who I am beneath all of this." Harrison studied her carefully, seeing both the gentle teacher and the deadly operative existing simultaneously in the same person. "And who is that, really?" Elena met his eyes with an intensity that made the air in the small classroom feel charged with dangerous energy. "Someone who has taken 57 lives in service to her country and would take 57 more without hesitation if it meant protecting the children in this school. Elena Rodriguez loves these kids like they're her own flesh and blood, would do anything to nurture their growth and protect their innocence. But if anyone ever threatened them, if anyone ever tried to harm them, they wouldn't be facing a third-grade teacher with art supplies and encouraging words. They'd be facing Ghost. And Ghost never misses her target. In the years that followed their confrontation, Colonel Harrison kept Eleanor's secret with the dedication of someone who understood the weight of classified information and the importance of protecting those who had served in ways that could never be officially acknowledged. Elena continued teaching with renewed purpose, her students never knowing that their gentle, caring teacher was one of the most dangerous people alive, someone who had served her country in ways that would remain forever hidden from public knowledge. The scars on her arm remained concealed beneath long sleeves and cardigans, but they served as a constant reminder of who she had been and who she remained ready to become again if circumstances demanded it. On quiet evenings, as she graded papers and planned lessons while classical music played softly in the background, Elena sometimes wondered if she had truly left Ghost behind, or if she had simply found a different kind of mission that required the same dedication and protective instincts. The answer came during a lockdown drill when her maternal instincts flared, and she positioned herself between her students and the door with the deadly calm of someone who had faced far worse threats than any school emergency could ever bring. In that moment, she understood that Elena Rodriguez and Ghost weren't separate identities at war with each other, but two aspects of the same person who had found a way to use her most dangerous skills in service of something beautiful and innocent. She was still a weapon, but now she was a weapon devoted to protection rather than elimination, and that made all the difference in the world.